everyone, welcome to Talking Tokens, a podcast focused on interviewing the best crypto founders, market players, and up-and-coming startups that are changing the industry every single Tuesday and Thursday. I'm Jacquelyn Melinek, your award-nominated host and former senior crypto reporter turned entrepreneur, and I'm excited to be here with you all. Now, let's get into it. Today, I am recording live at Korea Blockchain Week in the thick of it with Rushi Manche, the co-founder of Movement Labs. If you're at this event, you would see Movement sponsored basically a lot of things here. And if you're not at the event, you've probably seen Movement in a few headlines recently for its $41.4 total million raised, as well as Rushi and his co-founders contributed posts in Fortune talking about how they basically dropped out of college to start this thing. With that said, Rushi, it's nice to sit down with you and talk with you.
Thanks for having me. It's a great day in Seoul. I was expecting to be really warm in Seoul because I was in Japan before this, but it's actually pretty good weather. Unfortunately, taxis are horrible here, so literally can't get anywhere.
No, I know. It takes forever to get a taxi here, and I was also in Japan for this, and it was very, very hot and rainy. But Seoul is good. It's better weather, better temperament. Yeah. But we've been indoors. We've been here. To start off, you and your co-founder, as I mentioned in the intro, dropped out of college to start Movement Labs. That was in the fall of 2022?
2022.
So that's something most people don't do. You know, that's something you hear like Mark Zuckerberg did in the movies or something like that. What was the reasoning behind it for the two of you?
I think when we started, I've been coding since I was 14, was the youngest hire at United Health Group, one of the biggest health insurance companies in the United States. I think I've been a nerd programmer since I was little babes, basically. And Cooper's also been a builder since he was young. He was early at Bloomberg back in the day. But I think our general impetus was we were early Aptos builders, we were early Move engineers. Before that, I was a Cosmos engineer. And around August 2022, I had this hunch that this Move thing was gonna be big. I was used to like 10 users on Cosmos and 20 users on Ethereum. And here was an opportunity for billions of users to use programming for crypto from the Facebook app. So August 2022, I started tinkering around with it, playing around with it. I built the first DEX in Aptos. Cooper built the first yield aggregator. 2 of the first 10 people in the space. Post FTX, November 2022, we were like, okay, we want to try this movement thing. And we're kind of the builders or people who are like, you have to go all in or don't do anything. And for us at the time, we're like, okay, this is the depths of the bear market. This one, everyone's running off crypto. That's when it makes most sense to go into it. And we struggled for a few months. It was definitely, my parents were like, are you sure this is a good decision? And there's questions my decision at times, but I think now we proved the thesis.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, given that you are younger, I've met founders in the space that are 18 all the way up to whatever age you can work at. What were kind of the challenges out the gate for the two of you?
Yeah, so like
bear market included, but you know,
we started
also
the week after FTX collapsed. Around the time, the thesis was like, if it's not EVM or not on Ethereum, or it's like not conventional, it's not worth investing in. So most of the early investors we spoke to didn't believe in anything that was non-EVM. Even like Solana, people everyone written off. People were like, Solana's going to zero, Solana doesn't exist. It was when Solana's like $8.
Those days,
and now everyone is like,
everyone's like Solana this, Solana that.
Everyone's paying. So I think that back then the sentiment around what we were building didn't make much sense, as well as like we didn't have the fancy PhDs, we didn't have the fancy Google backgrounds. We were 2 hungry kids in a dorm room of a college basement in Nashville, Tennessee. So I think that with the combined with like poor market, bad founder background, according to conventional terms, was kind of difficult for fundraising, for building product, getting market, making original hires. So we struggled for the first 6 months. It was just us 2 in our basement, just working on decks, thinking thousands of no's. So I think that was the impetus.
Yeah, what was it like raising money at a young age? Like
so
when it came to investors, what were the conversations like for you?
It was like a snowball effect. So the first like 100 pitches basically were like outright no's, like doesn't
once
make sense.
Once you get one, it's
But once you start like building up traction, I think it's around May of 2023 when we really started picking up traction. Like we went to ETC last year, met our pre-seed investor, took a gamble on us, and then we kept working hard, kept delivering, kept doing partnerships, and that led to the Series A and eventually on beyond that.
Okay. Who would you say your mentors are right now? Do you have mentors?
Well, I always have people I look up to, right? I think someone who's been really impactful is Smokey from Berachain. When I first met him, it was before the Series A announcement. And I was just like, I really love the community you guys are doing. It's really fun, enthusiastic. It was attractive to young people like me. So I just DM'd him, and we've been working together since then. He's one of my closest friends in crypto. So shout out to him. And then I think from engineering point of view, been studying the Move guys, right? So Sam Blackshear from Sui, like he wrote Move, created Move. A lot of the work they've been doing is actually very transformative in terms of creating secure programming, creating formal verification, creating high throughput blockchains. That concept didn't make sense, I would say, like 2 years ago. And now today it seems like Solana's the future and these next generation blockchains are the future.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about how do you see Move kind of like developing over the past quarters, but also the past few years, given that it's fairly nascent and, you know, there's Sui using it, there's Aptos, there's you guys. So what do you think is kind of like bringing it to maybe ahead, or has it not reached that point yet?
So I think it's like the early days of Solana. If you look at the first 2 years of Solana, basically there's like Solid, which is the wallet, pretty poor UX infrastructure, very nascent infrastructure, like TVL was not there yet, and people thought it was dead. I think the moving system is still there, where it's like, we're still young, we're still like less than 2 years into it. It takes time for ecosystem to build. So my general thesis is that Move is a bet on secure programming. Every year there's $4.5 billion lost in smart contract hacks. Even Solana is working on Move implementation. So my thesis is we're gonna see this language extend everywhere, where it's like the Rust for blockchains. So we have Move on Ethereum, which is us. We have 2 layer ones that each are worth billions of dollars. We have Solana doing Move implementation. We have Move on Bitcoin, which is Nexio. We have Move on Ton. So it seems like every ecosystem is going to adapt this language as part of programming, and we're seeing ecosystem and developer count also increase. So I think it's like, give it around 6 to 12 months and it'll be a no-brainer.
And as those are the conversations you're having with ecosystems today that are not in Move and they're actually considering moving in.
Yeah, I mean, to some capacity, like they recognize benefits. Like if you talk to any developer who's like a compiler developer, usually they'll work on a different language like Cadence or Sway, which are all essentially derivatives of Move. So people ultimately can come to the conclusion that Move or similar languages are the best. It's just like, how do you get adoption for it? Because the biggest issue is like bringing liquidity over, bringing developers over, because all developers are writing Solidity right now, and some are writing Rust. So there's this great migration from Solidity developers to Rust-based programming. So I think over time, ecosystems are wanting to acknowledge that Move is a great language. It's the variance of how do you adapt it. Like we have Arbitrum want to do it for Stylus. We have Solana doing it for the LLVM. So it seems across the board, everyone wants it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I was going to bring up Stylus because that was recently announced, and it's essentially bringing like non-EVM compatible developers into the EVM world. And do you kind of see that happening with Move as well, that there will be like a bridge between that gap?
So I think with the thesis behind Stylus is multiple languages, right? Where you can have one execution environment, you can write JavaScript, Solidity, whatever. We also have a similar mentality where we have Move support, but we also support EVM support. So you can write Move and EVM in one execution environment. So our thesis is EVM is always going to be there. We love the EVM. But it's like legacy code. If you want to use Aave or Uniswap today, EVM is still the best place to do that. But if you want to do a fully on-chain Orbital, you want to do a fully on-chain social app, the EVM won't scale to that because like there's 10 TPS on most layer 2s. The performance is kind of weak. So you need alternative programming or alternative execution environments, whether that's a parallelized EVM with what Mana is doing, whether that's alternative VMs like Solana VM, Move VM, both will coexist.
And then on the front of Movement Labs, I feel like we really haven't talked about it. You guys are self-described as a next generation L2 blockchain, right? How do you think it differentiates from the plethora of L2s out there today?
This podcast is sponsored by Galaxy. If you're immersed in the world of Web3, Galaxy is a name you need to know. As a decentralized super app with an impressive 21 million users boasting over 100 million monthly transactions, Galaxy is elevating its impact with Gravity, the magnet chain for Web3. Gravity is designed for full chain abstraction, zero knowledge proof-based privacy, and rapid transaction speeds, all coming together to offer an unparalleled user experience. Gravity opens the door for developers to effortlessly build on the largest on-chain distribution platform, and for users, it promises an even smoother, more secure journey through Web3. It's not about being on-chain, it's about being on the right chain every single time. Galaxy is on a mission to onboard the world to Web3, and Gravity is the magnetic force that will propel the vision forward. Ready to launch your Web3 journey? Build the future on Gravity. Visit gravity.xyz for more information.
So I think there's a lot of L2 fatigue these days, where you had optimistic rollups, which like Optimism, Arbitrum. You had ZK rollups, which like ZK Sync, Scroll, etc. But there's new category emerging of next generation blockchains. You have like us for MoveVM, you have Eclipse doing the SVM, you have other teams doing parallelized EVM. The thesis is that we want to bring high throughput execution to Ethereum. typically in the past, to have 100,000 TPS, 30,000 TPS, whatever the number is, low fees, you needed to use a layer 1 like Solana. But people realize that I want Solana user experience, but still leverage Ethereum liquidity. So this bridge of like, okay, how do you bring alternative programming to Ethereum emerged? My general thesis is that the only thing that matters is user experience. With ZK rollups, optimistic rollups, the user experience still is relatively the same. Actually, Base is much cheaper than current ZK L2s, despite the fact that validity proofs bring like more decentralization and withdrawal times. Users just want cheap and fast transactions. So to that end, people love Solana because it's pretty quick, pretty cheap. Transaction finality is pretty fast. So a lot of the work that we're doing is bring Solana user experience to Ethereum with faster finality guarantees.
I was going to kind of talk about that too when you said the user experience. I feel like that's something that everyone talks about 24/7, and yet we still haven't perfected it in the sense that even for people in crypto, a lot of the user experiences are janky or hard, or for people outside the industry, they don't even know where to start or what to do. So how do you kind of approach that in making things more accessible on that front?
So there's two kind of levels, right? You have the infrastructure level, which is focused on bringing high throughput, low fee environments. In the past, using ETH-L1 was kind of painful. You had $10 per transaction, very slow approval times. So for like my mom to use crypto, it's kind of difficult. But from an infrastructure point of view, we see there's two main issues. There's speed. You want high throughput Solana-like UX. But I think what we're uniquely focused on is security. When I get like thinking about how do I get people excited about crypto and my family using crypto, the biggest thing they'll say is like, oh, it's gonna get hacked, it's gonna get scammed, rugged. And to an extent, they're kind of right. There's 4.5 billion lost every year if we're ever trying to get users on chain or get institutions on chain. You can't get hacked for so much. So a lot of the work that we're doing is bringing formal verification to runtime where you essentially stop real-entity attacks, integer overflows. I can get more into that, but fast and secure infrastructure. Then above that, you have like the chain abstraction wall experience where you shouldn't have to assign 8 different blockchains.
And go through 50 different steps.
Yeah, I think we've all used that as kind of pain. But I think we're getting to a point where like we have good chain abstraction solutions, we have good wall experiences. I think we're in the next 6 to 12 months, we'll see all those come to live and come to market. Recently, a lot of them got funded like Privy. So I don't think that US will be issue in a year or so because we have so much wall infrastructure. I think Coinbase is doing a lot of work in this department as well. So don't think that'll be an issue in like 6 to 12 months.
Yeah. And what is kind of Move's objectives when it partners with other chains like Aptos or ecosystems like the AggLayer? What was kind of your decision behind those and others? And then like we could kind of talk about what's like next for it.
Yeah, I think our thesis has always been move everywhere with movement. So even if it's not on directly L2, I think there's a lot of competition for wall frameworks. You have like Orbit, OP Stack, CDK, whatever. You have 15 different DA layers. Don't know if we need all those, but there's 15 different DA layers. But really no one's improving the execution environment. My analogy is like if you mod out a car, you have a really good chassis, really good brakes, we put a 1994 Cadillac engine in there, it's still gonna be a pretty poor car. So our job is to make the engine really fast for every chain, whether that's on our L2 and our ecosystem, whether that's an Arbitrum ecosystem, whether that's Solana's ecosystem, Bitcoin ecosystem. We want in a 10-year roadmap to be everywhere, where even if you're not on our chain and don't like movement, you still have option to use this execution environment. More being like evangelists of the language. And where that puts us today is like, we recognize that Ethereum is kind of our first landing point, but we have a lot of teams doing different systems. Next year, just announced a raise. They're doing movement Bitcoin. So if you're a Bitcoin maxi, you hate Ethereum, that's fine. You can still use movement. And that's kind of the 10-year direction.
Aside from the obvious chains, where do you see the most potential for growth on Move?
I think Ton is really interesting. I mean, we're seeing a big presence here at KBW, but like there's a lot of users and programming on Ton is kind of difficult. It's like Sol C, which is like a C variant. If you ever try writing it, it's like literally shooting yourself. So there's a whole opportunity for us to tap into this ecosystem. There's EVM on Ton showing up, but really even those EVMs on Ton running into issues because Ton has so much volume. There's literally millions of users playing these tap games. The EVM L2s on Ton are going to break. So we have a team called Paraton bringing this MoveVM as parallelization to Ton, and they're actually able to scale the Ton user base. So a lot of the work that we're looking into is like how do we get into Telegramming system? We have Telegram apps and movement on Telegram, so trying to penetrate that.
Okay. And then while you're here at Korea Blockchain Week, what is kind of your goal to accomplish?
I think one thing that we recognize is that Move is particularly big in Korea, like Aptos and Sui are the biggest presence in terms of layer 1, so obviously trying to kind of continue the move narrative. But I think beyond that, we see Korea, even compared to last year, as kind of the hub for consumer and like IP. We're seeing that Story Protocol announced recently, but there's a lot of momentum in terms of tokenizing consumer apps, tokenizing collectives, and as well as like actual regulation for the crypto ecosystem. So Asia is a particular focus of ours. Korea is a big part of that. So part of our presence at KBW has been trying to cement ourselves as leaders in the Korea space from an American lens as well.
Yeah, before we started recording, I'm sure people could probably tell, but we are both American based. How do you kind of view the American market right now?
It's not the best.
It's
a tough question. I think we're working backwards now. I'm not to comment on like election parties and stuff. I just think like we have like the OpenSea's lawsuit recently was like so hard stabbing because like we spent so much time on NFTs and like popularizing that, and the SEC and the government thinks that it's a security when obviously like a trading card isn't. So I think we're heading hopefully in the right direction, but the election will be a big part of that, and it is a voting issue. So I think the positive note is that crypto is a voting issue. Politicians are talking about it. It's a daily thing on the news. That's very, very good for publicity. But I think the downside is that not everyone's on the same page of making it positive. Some people still disagree with it. Whereas other countries are light years ahead, have regulation in place. We're not asking for so much. We're just asking for clarity so we know what to do. And it's still been difficult.
When it comes to regional expansion for movement, what are you really focused on? Obviously, you're here in Asia. We talked briefly about that. But where do you see the most opportunity, maybe?
So actually, one of our underdeveloped areas is Nigeria and Southern Africa. We're seeing a huge amount of movement community members and meetups there, but also applications. We have an app called Tender Cash, which essentially payment processing in Africa is pretty difficult because of the currencies. So what they enable you to do is put stable coins. If you're buying, let's say, jewelry or buying food at a conveyor belt, you can essentially tap your phone and send USDC right on Tron, but also via Movement as the native product, where you can send USDT across and pay for things. So payments in sub-Saharan Africa is pretty interesting, as well as Latin America. I think it's 1/3 of Argentina uses crypto. So spending a lot of work there.
Yeah. What do developers want to build with Move?
So,
compared to maybe other languages?
Yeah, so I think there's two things. I think on the DeFi side, yes, you can deploy, you can copy paste fork, but the majority of ecosystem apps are getting funded. I think it's like 7 DeFi apps that raise rounds. They're focused on secure DeFi, where if I'm a lending protocol or yield aggregator, on EVM, like security wasn't there. Whereas on Move, you can market to LP saying like, look, Move has never been hacked, knock on wood, and it won't be hacked. And here's the security guarantees we can give you that other EVM chains can. So this concept of secure DeFi is very, very interesting. It's something we're spending a lot of time on. On the consumer side, I think it's like, okay, a lot of the EVMs today, L2s can't really scale. They tap out like 100 TPS. So how do you build these fully on-chain apps that can't be possible on Arbitrum, Optimism, et cetera, with parallelization? And that comes down to like on-chain order books that can fully parallelize and have low latency for HFT. You have like even Telegram tap apps that are millions of transactions that would shut down other L2s. So like this concept of like high throughput, fully on-chain consumer-facing apps, as well as secure DeFi, I would say is a predominant focus.
Okay, that's interesting. And then in regards to movement itself, what is on the roadmap for you, let's say in the near term and long term? So
we launched testnet 3 weeks ago, crossed over 120 million transactions, and now we have mainnet coming up into this year.
No big deal?
No big deal. But yeah, this hoarding system, working with ecosystem teams to raise. We have an accelerator called the Move Collective, where it's kind of most of my time spent, like helping teams raise, get to market, and just being there for teams. So the accelerator is coming out this month, as well as mainnet end of this month, end of this year.
So it's early days.
Early days.
Yeah.
Early days.
What do you think would be the biggest vision, or let's say, what word would you like to be described for Movement Labs? Or a slogan, short slogan.
Oh, well, it's Move everywhere, right? Okay. We want the language to be everywhere, the VM to be everywhere.
Right.
I want to talk about Move. I want to learn Move. Even if it's not a movement, it's on Aptos Suite. Like, we would love that, right? Because overall, the more people writing Move, more secure programming, less hacks, better UX. That's a win for the entire industry.
Okay. And then one of my last questions is, what else are you looking at in the industry that we haven't talked about that you think other people should be paying attention to?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think I've been spending a lot of time at Deepen. Well, the definition.
I saw your tweet.
Yeah. The definition of Deepen is like everything, right? Because it's like just use cases. Even the consumer kind of pisses me off because it's like use cases. There's actually users. But yeah, I think Deepen's particularly cool because these are things that are literally only possible at crypto. Like for example, I spent a lot of time SF. If you're like a small scale startup, renting GPUs is pretty expensive. You spend a month, 2 months minimum GPU time. But with Akash and IONET, you can now rent by the minute, which enables you as an AI developer to have much lower costs and only buy what you want. There's also a lot of stuff about energy. So like Daylight, I'm not an investor in any of these, but Daylight is spending a lot of time in tokenizing energy grid such that if you, let's say for example, have energy grid in Buenos Aires and you want to tap into Rio energy grid, you can do that in a decentralized network. So there's a lot of these niche things, which I don't know how they're going to play out. I don't know if it's going to work, but it's a lot different and better than the typical DEX and lending protocol. So it's taking a lot of time there and working with Deepen teams at the moment.
Yeah, okay. And lastly, can you leave us with a piece of advice, something you've carried with you throughout your time in this industry?
Just be ready to eat shit. Like even in the market that we are today, it's
Wonderful.
It's not the best. A lot of teams aren't getting funded. Tokens aren't doing well, but that's what you need, right? It weeds out the people that aren't here for the tech long term. So like, be ready to hear 1,000 no's. Our journey was probably one of the most difficult ones in crypto recently, and we're still here chipping away.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on today, Rushi. It was a pleasure.
Thanks so much, Jackie. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.